So last night I watched the final episode of Euphoria, and holy shit, I have never watched a final season of a show where it felt like the writer was actively becoming bored with the show he was writing and decided to just write an entirely different show altogether. The final episode of Euphoria feels like if we were at the end of the Frieza saga, and rather than watching Goku and Frieza battle, we went back to Earth and watched like Yamcha play 20 games of baseball. I kind of had a feeling something was going to be up with season 3 of Euphoria because, well, it took 4 years in between this and season 2, but also, Euphoria is a teen drama, and teen dramas have a very particular problem when it comes to their production because they're one of the only types of media with a real hard expiration date, the physical aging of their cast. If you're in charge of a teen drama, you only have a very limited shelf life in which your cast can believably play teenagers. And it's interesting seeing Euphoria come up against this problem because this is the same problem faced by practically every successful teen drama before it. One Tree Hill, Dawson's Creek, The OC, my beloved Riverdale. And an especially interesting wrinkle is that depending on who you talk to, Euphoria can kind of be seen as the death knell to the teen drama. A lot of teen dramas, they work by shooting dozens and dozens of episodes in very short successions. There doesn't tend to be a lot that happens in the plot of the episodes. It's more about the melodrama and interpersonal relationships as different people break up and get back together. The productions don't tend to be especially lavish, at least compared to like more kind of prestige TV shows, and they use very limited sets. Also, they can be shot in quick succession. Euphoria did not work like this at all. This was a show where the production was about as fucking insane as anything you'd see in a major motion picture movie. But it wasn't just how the show looked, it was how it felt and the topics it was willing to cover. And in a way that made previous teen dramas look absolutely tame by comparison. Now, you did have stuff like the British version of The Skins, which was a show that I'm sure traumatized many a parent who stumbled across it. A show where teenagers were fucking and doing drugs and all the kinds of things that parents worry their teenagers will get into. That was also Euphoria. Euphoria is a show of teenagers dealing with all kinds of different shit, be it drug addiction, abusive parents, we'll say many adult situations. The second episode of Euphoria, I think it was the second episode, could be wrong about that, had a prolonged section about the composition of dick pics. That is the kind of shit we are dealing with here. At the heart of Euphoria is its main character, Rue, played by Zendaya. And not only was Rue's teenage years a little more complicated by the fact that she has a drug addiction, she also is a lesbian and frequently falls in love with other girls, one of which is Jules. And this was already a little shocking because a lesbian relationship at the heart of a major prestige teen drama is not really something that's happened before. I mean, it has happened, but it's kind of a scooch to the side in a sort of Glee kind of way. But here, it was front and center. But not just that, because at the end of episode 1 of Euphoria, a bomb blast. Not only is Jules a girl, she is a trans girl. And a trans girl being at the center of a show like this has kind of, to my awareness, never happened, and certainly not in a show that became this immediately popular. From here, the teenagers tumble down a Alice in Wonderland style rabbit hole of dick pics and abusive adults, drug addiction, compromising situations, and violence. And it is such a messy and at times kind of horrifying show to watch. And this, of course, courted a lot of controversy, with parents groups calling the show disgusting and criticizing for glorifying what they saw as degenerate behavior. And I personally did not feel that way. This will probably come as a surprise to some of you, because while certain parts of my early teenage years were absolutely punctuated by nothing but long sessions of Final Fantasy VII and Street Fighter Alpha 3 on the PlayStation 1, there were times in my teenage years I actually got like pretty messy. When I turned around 16, I started hanging out with a group of, I'll say older kids, but really most of them weren't kids. And I ended up being in a lot of situations where I just shouldn't have been, and around people I should not have been around. I got into drinking and taking drugs much sooner than I was ready for any of this stuff. And it led to one night when I was hanging out with a girl, we'll call her Sarah, I got so blackout drunk that at one point my friends had to like take care of me. They put me against a wall to try and steady me, and for whatever reason, I decided to backwards headbutt the wall as hard as I could, splitting open my skull and gushing blood forward. I only regained consciousness the next morning when I heard someone asking me, am I okay? To which I said, Sarah? And then a response from the cloudy nether realm in front of me just said, Sarah me arse, this is your mother. Unbeknownst to me, my friends had carried me home in my oblivious drunken state and delivered me to my horrified parents. I still feel immense guilt when I think about that to this day, and even more so because the day they brought me home on was Mother's Day. Yay, happy Mother's Day, Mom. I can remember my parents were just like so upset and so furious and so sad about this, and my mom was just like, I think you should just get a shower. And so I went upstairs and I was watching like the blood out of my hair, and I was watching it pool in the drain by my feet, and I just had this like really overwhelming sensation of like, oh man, I don't think I can keep living like this. That is what Euphoria feels like. That is the exact feeling of watching Euphoria. It is this teenage car crash wasteland where teenagers make continually awful decisions and their life spirals and spirals and spirals. It has a great cast and like a lot of good characters. You know, you had Zendaya who plays Rue, then you have Hunter Schafer who plays Jules, who is just one of the most ethereally beautiful people you will ever see. Lexi is the kind of like bookworm, Maddie is the kind of mean popular kid, and Cassie is Sydney Sweeney. Can't really elaborate on that further, that's just kinda who she is. And Jacob Elordi plays Nate, this fucking nightmare prep. He's like a soulless automaton if a soulless automaton was really into physical assault and probably water polo. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed Euphoria, and I actually really enjoyed season 2, even though people were kind of divided on that one. To me, I love that season because it just takes all the teenage insanity of 1 and just cranks it up to even more ludicrous levels. I still feel immense joy in my heart when I think of Lexi's play from season 2. It's just, the Dick song, it's just great. And then season 2 ends and Euphoria goes away for 4 years. Now, it's difficult to know what is actually what here. There's a lot of rumors about different cast members not getting on, drama with the creator Sam Levington, I think is his name. It's clear that something was right, and that would definitely become apparent in season 3. Season 3 was eventually shot after 4 years, and immediately we run into the inevitable teen drama problem. All our teenage looking cast are now visibly adults, and so we find our characters 4 years later. And I think even from the first shot, something feels so weird here because we get this protracted sequence of Rue trying to seesaw her car over this like giant wall because she is now a drug runner for a gang. And it's kind of like, it feels like a segment from Breaking Bad. You know, it feels like a segment that Vince Russo would write. No, wait, Vince Gilligan, not Vince Russo. Although I would abso-fucking-lutely watch a season of Euphoria written by Vince Russo. That might have been the right move here. And so over the course of the season, we get this hyper fragmented version of Euphoria. Real Arrested Development season 4 vibes, where it's apparent that very rarely could they actually get all the characters in the one location to shoot a season. You've got Jules over here being kept as a little bird painter by some weird plastic surgeon. You have Rue over here dealing with all kinds of criminal gang activity. Nate's over there dealing with being a landscape business owner and also future body bag being pursued by a bunch of Eastern European villains, drug men. I don't know. But the thing is, I didn't think this season was all bad. I've heard people say that they think that this is just one of the worst seasons of television they've ever seen. Personally, I didn't agree. Personally, I was actually having a pretty good time up to a point. And I really, really enjoyed the wedding of Cassie and Nate. This was always going to be kind of fun, as Cassie is kind of a train wreck and Nate is just a straight up fucking psychopath. And I am, you know that things aren't going to go well. You know that this is going to be like a bad wedding, but the particular way it goes bad and the things that happen, these kind of shitty people, there's a real like fun catharsis to it, and it's just a disaster of an event and a lot of fun. But I think that's probably the last time I felt like season 3 of Euphoria really had any idea about what it was doing, because after this, everything kind of falls apart. Nate gets in more trouble with these gangsters, and he drags Maddie and Cassie down into it. And all of a sudden, you're getting all these sequences where Nate is just getting beat up over and over and over and over again. And there's the sense that the writers are taking real glee in torturing this character. And personally, I feel like no matter how irredeemable a character is in a story or the awful things they do, the writer needs to have a certain amount of empathy for them. Even like your worst fucking villains, I think there has to be some sense that like this is a person. I think if you have someone who is just completely hated by the story itself, it just doesn't really work, because it just comes across as like just putting a sim in a swimming pool and erasing the ladder out of it. That's how Nate feels in season 3 of Euphoria, and it's fine, but it's like it gets to a point and it's like, what are we doing here? What is the goal with this character? And it gets even worse when Nate is then trapped in I can't believe, when I think of like the early seasons of Euphoria, I can't believe this is a sentence about to come out of my mouth. Nate is buried alive in a coffin as like kind of torture, but then a rattlesnake, just by pure coincidence, falls down his like air pipe and bites him to death. And it's like, okay, what? And this is what I mean about like, I feel like you have to have some empathy towards your characters, because I think having Nate get his comeuppance was obviously the way to go. But I would have really loved to see that character maybe like realize or acknowledge what a piece of shit he's been, and then get his comeuppance when it's too late. That to me is nearly crueler, but also kind of says something. You know, now the character is like, okay, I fucking suck, but it's too late, and I wish I had learned not to suck earlier. That's like a lesson. There's something we can take from that. But the way he does die is just like, he's a piece of shit, he gets in a bad situation, and then he disappears. And like, that's it, you know? And it was like, okay, fucking, what are we doing? Another weird part about season 3 is that there's actually a host of new characters introduced, like Alamo Brown, who kind of becomes the eventual, like, kind of bad guy of the series. And Alamo Brown is this, like, strip club owner that Rue starts working for, who becomes her boss instead of Lori and the, how do I put this politely? Neo-Nazi hillbilly gang. And I actually loved Alamo Brown. I thought the actor who played him was fucking phenomenal and just like stole the show in every scene that he's in. And he's the one responsible for dragging Rue deeper into this world of like crime and drugs and smuggling. And he is genuinely great. Like his outfits, the way he kind of owns every scene, the fucking aura from this guy. I genuinely loved him. The problem is that he feels like a character from a different show. And as the season goes on, we spend more and more time with these like new characters or side characters and less with the actual cast themselves. I'd say if you took the final episode of Euphoria and broke it down into camera time for like the main cast that's been in it since season 1 and all the other characters, it has to be like maybe 2/5 of the show of the main characters, and everything else was these new characters. To the point that by the last 2 episodes, we have like switched genres completely. This is now like a prestige crime drama than anything to do with the show's roots. And it's like, it just really leaves you feeling with the question of like, well, what the fuck are we doing here? You know, there's parts of the season that work and that feel like logical extensions of those characters. I really enjoyed Cassie's journey to becoming an OnlyFans model. You see her try to do in the start, and she's so bad at it, and it's so like nothing. And then seeing like how her and Maddie kind of work the system, I was actually like, okay, yeah, this does feel like, you know, the extension of those characters' story. Like this is kind of interesting. But it feels like at this point we have just kind of chopped all that and started a new TV show on the grave of Euphoria. There's also this part of season 3 that felt really out of place as well, in that the show gets like quite religious religious. And I'm not particularly saying that the characters themselves get religious, even though they do. I mean, it genuinely feels like the show becomes religious, and religion is presented as this like divine saving force in kind of the characters' lives. And look, what I'll say about this is, if you are religious, this part of the show probably resonated with you on some level. If you are not, it probably won't. I'm not, it didn't. And so I kind of spend like a lot of the last episode staring at the screen, wondering why the fuck we are wasting time watching Lexi talk about her opinions on the Bible. It just felt really out of place to me and unearned given how late it's coming in this entire production. So then, the final episode, Alamo Brown realizes that Rue is working with the feds and poisons her with fentanyl, killing her. Interesting choice to kill your main character like a third of the way into the final episode, but they went for it. And this means that Rue's old sponsor, who up till now has been like a side character at best in this entire show, dresses in his military uniform and goes and has a cowboy-esque showdown with Alamo Brown. It just feels like it turns the show into something completely different. Like, this isn't even about any of our characters anymore. It's about this sponsor character and the fact that he's sad Rue died. And it's just so odd, We get one single shot of Jules, who's basically just sad Rue's dead. Cassie continues to just be Cassie. Maddie is there, and Nate was eaten by a snake. It's just, wow, this all really went nowhere. And so, yeah, I think this final season, like, there's definitely things here to enjoy, but as a story, it kind of sucks a little bit. But I guess that's the inevitable fate of long-term teen dramas. You always hit a point where these stories of adolescence and growing up, they just can't be that anymore, and so they have to become something different. The OC had to become about not going to college. Riverdale had to become about alternate dimensions and time travel and having your life erased and tickle fighting rings and Archie being in a war and Jughead finding a magic typewriter and alternate reality Jughead gaining superpowers and the devil, I think, the devil did come into one episode, and Veronica being filled with bees. And so I guess Euphoria had to become something else. So I guess it became Breaking Bad. Yeah. Okay, that's it. Till next time.